Hi, in this talk we'll discuss the causes of group segregation. Why do our friends often belong to the same group? Why is there segregation in terms of race, ethnicity, gender and age? There are four causes of group segregation, and let's start with the first one, namely the role of constraints and structural opportunities. The idea behind the structural opportunity theory is that social ties are made in social context. Schools, for example, are such a social context. They provide a pool of people we meet every day when we're in school. And when you meet each other often, you're likely to become friends. And this process then results in group segregation if the composition of schools is segregated. For example, if schools are segregated by race, one school having mainly black students, the other mainly white students, then it leads to strong racial group segregation. Group segregation is then the result of unequal meeting opportunities between members of different racial groups. Schools are an example of foci. These are social settings in which people participate and they create the pool of people we meet. Other examples of foci are neighborhoods, workplaces, and voluntary organizations. The more segregated these foci are by group affiliations, the stronger group segregation will be. So what causes this segregation in foci? One reason is consolidation, which means that groups differ with respect to a certain dimension, such as income. If, for example, whites have much higher income than blacks, it may result in the two groups living in different neighborhoods, going to different schools, and so on. And that means that people often meet someone from their own race in school, in the neighborhood, and at work. And because of these constraints, they will not develop group bridging ties. And there is ample evidence which confirms the structural opportunity theory. But group segregation is not only driven by constraints. According to homophily theory, people prefer to interact and befriend others who are socially similar to them. And there are actually two assumptions that underlie this homophily proposition. First, interaction with in-group members is sometimes easier in terms of coordination of actions. Attending meetings of a religious group is much more easy to coordinate with your friends in case they belong to the same religious group as you do. Second, interactions with in-group members are more psychologically rewarding than contacts with out-group members. And the idea is that because of the human need for behavioral approval, people will seek social ties with in-group members, as these in-group members will confirm that their cultural beliefs, values and behaviors are right. There's a lot of evidence in support for the homophily theory. It comes from two sources. First, there is indirect evidence, which comes from research on actual marriages and friendships. And these studies find that there is a strong tendency towards the creation of in-group ties more than what would be expected under random choice. And second, there is direct evidence, which comes from stated preferences in research on dating. And these studies find that people prefer to date members from the in-group, such as their own racial group. So these insights point to the same direction. Homophily is a key tie formation mechanism, which helps us to understand why group segregation emerges. And because there's so much empirical evidence for the impact of homophily, we can call it a stylized fact. And beyond these two main causes of group segregation, there are actually two more. Let's briefly look at the role of transitivity. Suppose you are Amy, and these are three of your social ties. And suppose you met them in school, the tennis club, and at work. And because these foci were segregated by race, you tend to end up with a highly homogeneous network, a white network. But now something important happens. Your social ties tend to become connected as well. And that is the transitivity tendency which we have discussed before. So Brad gets to know Claire and Emma and Claire also become connections. And that means that group segregation is amplified because of this transitivity tendency. Finally, third parties can cause group segregation. Third parties can be parents, peers, and others in the social environment. According to third-party theory, these people may interfere with the relationship between two persons. Suppose these are Amy's parents, and assume that they prefer that she marries someone from the own racial group. It would then be hard for her to date someone from another racial group, even if she really likes that person. It would lead to an unbalanced triad because her parents disapprove outgroups, and that leads to a lot of tension in the family. She may have to break up with her parents, but that's difficult for her, of course. So, in the end, she may choose outcome A, to keep the good relations with her parents. But the consequence of this is group segregation. In summary, group segregation is caused by multiple factors. The foci in which we participate are often segregated, which means that we often meet people who are similar to us. On top of that, people also have a preference to become friends with in-group members. There's a lot of evidence for this homophily tendency. Group segregation then tends to get amplified because of the transitivity tendency. And finally, third parties generally promote in-group ties. So the combination of these four mechanisms leads to group segregation. And if we want to change segregation, we have to look at how these processes can be changed. Okay, thanks for listening.